Hello there, Michael Canet from Prostatis. If you're new to the channel, welcome aboard. We simplify retirement by helping you protect more of what you built, keep more of it in your hands, and pass it on the right way with clarity, not confusion. Now let me ask you something here. If you've already drafted a will or created a trust, do you feel like your estate plan is done? That's what a lot of retirees assume, but the truth is most estate plans do not fail because the documents are wrong, but because the plan was never fully integrated into the rest of their financial life. So we had a prospective client come in a few years ago and they had done this trust. It was really pretty, lots and lots of pages, big old binder, their name was engraved, lots of legal language, everything was there, the works. But the fact is as we sat down and reviewed it, none of their documents had actually been put into the trust except for their real estate. Now, they had all these rules about what was supposed to happen, but none of the assets were in the trust, which means the whole purpose of the trust in the first place was to avoid probate. And now all their assets were going to go through probate because they had not been transferred into the trust. Over 80% of the trusts we see in our office have never been funded correctly, and that's why these estate plans fail. It's not because the document's wrong, it's because the attorney or whoever recommended it to you did not assist you in making sure all the assets are properly titled. And worse yet, I get phone calls from attorneys saying, I'm going to create this trust for one of your clients, and here's what we're doing. One size fits all, not done correctly, and you are hosed and taxed through the roof. So literally have this attorney from Virginia call us. My client, we're going to call her Jackie, hires him in Virginia to do an estate plan. Thank God she called me before she did this. She started telling me this guy was having to make all these changes. I said, well, have him call me so I can talk about it. He calls me and says, we're doing this plan, here's what we're going to do. And he's explaining it to me, and he asked me, who should we make the beneficiaries? I told her to go ahead and put the trust as beneficiaries. And I stopped and I was listening to him. I said, you told her what? He said, we're going to make the trust the beneficiary of all our assets. And I said, you told her to change the beneficiaries on her annuities and IRAs to the trust? Are you insane? Do you understand the tax implications? A trust is a non-natural life. Some of these annuities, now we have to take it out within 5 years instead of over 10 years or longer. These IRAs, they could be forced to be taken out all at once instead of 10 years. You just made a mess of things. I can't believe, first of all, I can't believe you don't understand what are the tax implications of naming a trust the beneficiary on qualified assets. He had no clue. He was told her for her non-qualified annuities to literally change the ownership to the trust. Boom, taxable event as soon as she signed the documents. And at the end of the conversation, he tells me, thank you so much. I am starting to build my estate planning practice, and this is great information. And all I'm thinking to myself is this guy is advertising someplace. People are coming in and he is using them as guinea pigs, and he is going to have guinea pigs and he won't know whether it was correct or not for 10, 20, 30 years down the road. So for 10 to 20 years, he's going to make the same mistake over and over again. Why is that even allowed? I was just absolutely flabbergasted at the fact that he was going to screw her entire tax plan and her entire retirement because he had no clue about the tax implications. And if you're sitting here watching this and you're sitting here listening to this, don't put yourself or your family in that position. That's an insane way to go through retirement, and it's an insane way to leave the money to your heirs, the nightmare that they're going to encounter. Let's fix this from the get-go. So the fact is, most attorneys aren't investment professionals, and most advisors aren't tax planners, and no one's connecting the dots until it's too late. Well, here at Prostatis, we believe that estate planning isn't separate from your income tax planning or your risk strategies or your income planning. It's all part of one plan, and if it's not working together, it's not working at all. If this sounds familiar, or if you've been putting off your estate planning because it feels complicated, drop a comment below, and we are here to make it simpler. Here's the bigger risk. Even if your estate planning documents are perfect on paper, if your assets, taxes, and account titles don't match the plan, the results can be costly and almost catastrophic. Probate, delays, unintended beneficiaries, extra taxes, and a whole lot of family conflict that you never intended. That's why we bring everything under one roof. Legal and estate planning, tax planning, investments, income, long-term care, legacy goal. It's not someone else's job. From our perspective, it's our job. And from our perspective, you should insist on your advisory team doing this for you as well. And the reality is that there are so many what we affectionately call trust mills. There's so many trust mills out there doing workshops telling you have to have a revocable living trust. And I've even had conversations with these attorneys that say all your clients should have trust. And my question is always, why? Why does my client need a trust? Well, it avoids probate. Well, do you know what else avoids probate? Every asset you own, you can put a beneficiary on it. And if you have a beneficiary on every asset you own, you know what goes through probate? Nothing. So putting a beneficiary on every asset you own avoids probate, just like having a trust. And did you know you could actually put beneficiaries on your house? You don't want to transfer ownership to the kids or to whomever your beneficiary is, but you can put beneficiaries on your real estate. So you can avoid probate on everything you own, with the exception of possibly your automobiles. And most states have a means for you to transfer those assets without having to go through probate anyways. So a trust, yes, it avoids probate, but so does putting a beneficiary in everything. So what's the other reason why people recommend trusts all the time? Well, it minimizes and eliminates taxes. Yeah? No, it doesn't. Tax planning does. And do you know what you can do tax planning? You can do the same estate tax planning with or without a trust, with or without a will. So you do not need a trust to do proper tax planning from an estate tax planning point of view. I hear all the time, well, it's private. Well, you know what? If none of your assets go through probate in the first place because all your assets have a beneficiary on it, it's private as well. It never gets in front of a court. Nobody ever sees it. So avoids probate, both do that. Taxes, with or without a trust. Private, with or without a trust. And you know what? So really the only reason from my perspective why people should have a trust, if you're trying to control your assets from beyond the grave, you're trying to say that no matter what happens to my children, this is where I want the money to go to, maybe a trust makes sense. If you have a second marriage and you want to take care of your new spouse, but when your new spouse passes away, you want the assets to go to your children from your first marriage, then probably a trust makes sense. If you have a child with special needs, I'm talking about that child who can't get out of his own way, the 40-year-old wannabe rock star. Maybe you need to have a trust for him or her to protect them from spending the money too quickly. But at the end of the day, don't fall into that trap that everybody needs a trust just because you hear, oh my God, your world's going to fall apart if you do not have a trust. That's simply not true. We have this conversation with clients all the time. Estate planning isn't about legal language. It's about protecting your life's work. It's about making sure your wishes are carried out clearly, efficiently, and without stress for your family and the people you love. So if you're not sure if your estate plan actually works, or even if you have one, it's time to review it. And make sure it's not just a binder, but in action. Download our free Savvy Investor Retirement Summary, or better yet, schedule a discovery call to make sure your legacy plan is as solid as the life you built around it. And if this gave you something to think about, hit the like button, subscribe, and drop your estate planning questions in the comments below. We are here to help.